I have a confession to make. Since becoming an empty nester, I've had a desire to skip Christmas. For just 1 year, I want to avoid it entirely. In fact, for many years, I've recognized in myself an inner Grinch that wants to leave the tree and all the decorations in the attic and pretend it's just another day. That's because I'm so weary of that race from Thanksgiving to December 25th to bake and shop and decorate and wrap and ship and cook and preach and shop some more and then be ready to hit the road, because none of my family lives in Florida. Save for my beloved husband, of course, but he's in the same situation. He packs up and takes off for Maryland every Christmas. He has 2 children, a son and a daughter, and between them they have 6 children, so he has 6 grandchildren. Of that I am envious. But I long to abandon the commercialized, over-consuming, hyped-up countdown to what is supposed to be a holy day, a holiday. Now, I understand that there's an incongruence between my words and being literally surrounded by Christmas trees and holiday bling, right? I'm also aware that this is your first year in many, many years without Harris, who obviously had a very different attitude towards Christmas than me. If you're a newcomer visiting for the first time, Harris Warden was a 25-year minister here who just retired in the fall. And by the way, people like Harris, I really do appreciate them. I appreciate those who find joy in this season and whose good cheer spreads like hot cocoa on a cold night. But I do feel the need to be honest and authentic about my dis-ease with the demands of the holiday season that arise not from the old story of the birth of Christ, or from the older story of the miracle of a bit of lamp oil burning for a week, nor it doesn't arise from the wisdom of the Buddha, who taught that there is light always in all of us. And it doesn't arise from the Celtic lore that brings assurance that the sun is reborn each winter solstice. I do have a problem with perfection, and that is on me. So I have to remind myself that the perfect gift wrapped with the perfect bow, placed under a tree dripping with ornaments while the children in their beds dream of Barbies and G.I. Joes. These things, I have to remember, have little to do with the multiple religious traditions that attempt to bring hope, awe, and light to the long nights and short days of this time of year. I have to remember that Black Friday has little relevance to the stories that have comforted and inspired people for millennia. Well, why then do we seem to persist in being preoccupied? I'm talking the big royal we, culturally, socially. Why do we persist in being preoccupied by the shallow end of the holiday meaning? Well, call me paranoid or a conspiracy theorist, but I think that for the past 100 years in our society, we have been conditioned to be consumers. Captains of industry don't want us to build meaning in our lives because we are more easily manipulated when we are empty and isolated beings. We humans have a basic need for meaning and connection in our lives. Meaning making, experiencing awe, being humbled by that which is greater, by that which is beyond our understanding. We have a need for being in authentic and right relationship in a community together. And these are the intangible aspects of our lives that nourish our souls or our inner selves, our interiors. Without community, without story, without meaning, without a spiritual practice or faith, our souls, our interior lives become impoverished. And that can be a really lonely, fearful state of being. Now, many try to assuage that emptiness with food and drugs and alcohol and material things. Have you ever heard of retail therapy? Well, here's the rub. The days leading to the longest night of the year, the winter solstice, can make those feelings of loneliness and emptiness more intense. It's no accident that the winter holidays in contemporary times are more about consuming than about the hallmarks of the religion or the spirituality or the love that's in the message of the season. I know a minister who heads up the organization which Peace, that our community organizer is a part of. He would say that in our culture, the market gods, he calls it's a metaphor, the market gods, that's a metaphor for consumerism. He would say that the market gods have supplanted religion as the arbiters of meaning in our lives. And that's a pity, and something that we should try to resist. Perhaps those of us attending this worship service this morning are in fact countercultural. Perhaps being here, we don't heed the market gods. And perhaps I'm preaching to the choir, and I hope so. Yet, let us be mindful that it takes more than warming a seat on Sunday morning to feed our souls. I'd like to think that you hang on my every word every Sunday I'm in the pulpit. Not. For one thing, listening to my words or anybody's words is a passive act. Listening to words and talking, even if it's discussing something deep and meaningful, that keeps us in our heads. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but it keeps us in our heads. What we all need in addition to a Sunday morning is a practice, an embodiment of hope and awe. And storytelling can embody hope. It may be why we love the solstice, the Hanukkah, and the Christmas Eve services so much, because those stories contain myth and metaphor that connects us in ways that transcend our rationality. Such stories touch our hearts. Our understanding is felt. Myth, metaphor, and the use of archetypes create a more visceral experience in us. And it's not always a bad thing to experience things from here, folks, your solar plexus. Sometimes we rational Unitarian Universalists dismiss too readily the gospel story of Jesus' birth. And to that I ask, well, who would ever tell a story of a man born and raised in the backwater of Nazareth, conceived in the usual way, to Jewish commoners? Who would find spellbinding the day-to-day life of a brilliant young man, learning the carpentry trade from his father and studying Hebrew scriptures? No, if you want to tell a story that endures, you tell the story of a hero, of someone extraordinary, of someone in history who might have the ability to return from death and save us from ourselves. And if that's the case, then the hero must at least be partly divine. So that's why we have to have a birth in proximity to, partly divine and partly royal, which takes us to Bethlehem, just outside the temple in Jerusalem. Our hero must be capable of divine acts, like defying the laws of nature and performing miraculous acts. Our hero must be above human foibles and must be above our human foibles and our desires, and therefore saintly. Otherwise, he or she is no different from the rest of us. Our hero must be wiser than any before or since, and must possess a godlike presence that puts in mind the question of whether our Savior and hero was ever human to begin with. Ergo, the bodily ascension from the tomb and the promise of return. This is a story that we can embrace as myth, as the hero's story, and one that keeps hope alive for humanity and the world that we live in. This is a story that can inspire heaven on earth. If we can embody hope through storytelling and hearing the hero's journey, we can embody awe as well. Psychologists define awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends one's understanding of the world. So it's something that's bigger than us. Experiments were conducted that compared the benefits to people who experienced something awesome in nature, like towering trees, versus experiencing something awesomely wrought by human hands, like a towering building. And the results showed that the experience of awe in nature has better after effects in terms of helping you to reorient yourself to being small, a small part of something much greater. It's a humbling experience. They found that even in momentary experiences of awe in nature, that people were demonstrated that they felt less entitled and more altruistic. So to embody awe is simple. Go outside on one of these beautifully cool nights and look up at the brightness of Jupiter and the faint orange of Mars bracketing the moon. And can you contemplate the vastness of the Milky Way? We can't see it from this dense humid air, but it's there and it's vast. And we're just a tiny part of it. And yet there are uncounted numbers of galaxies in the universe. Go to the beach in the morning and watch as the night of Earth spins at about 1,000 miles an hour to face once again the sun And try to reframe the sun emerging on the horizon in this way. You're actually being spun towards it. I think this way, yes. Try to reframe that. Go to the beach at night, close your eyes, and use your other senses to experience the Atlantic Ocean. Can you smell it? Can you taste the salt spray? Can you sense the vastness before you? Now, sometimes an awesome moment comes to us unbidden, like the autumn day when I lived in Michigan. I was driving an unfamiliar route and I came round a bend to a site that took my breath away. It was a giant sugar maple ablaze in orange and red leaves. It was huge. And there was a backdrop of evergreens and a crystal clear blue sky. It was such a momentary thing as I sped by, a freeze frame of utter beauty. In a singular moment, the elements of nature conspired to make me happy to be alive. That's how I experienced it anyway. And I call this a moment of grace. Of moments like these, if you're familiar with author Anne Lamott, she says, quote, "I do not understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us," end quote. I'm sure you all have had similar moments, a singular experience never to be repeated or recreated, but nonetheless unforgettable. Unforgettable in some awesome, joyful way. These are the moments that transform us by bringing us meaning and feeding our souls. And finally, a word on the third element of my triumvirate here. The ancient Celts at this time of year once prepared Yule logs that would burn all night in their hearths during the winter solstice. Light was and is an essential part of any winter holiday celebration because it's a metaphor for hope. Without knowledge of astrophysics, would a person feel assured of a return to longer, warmer days? I mean, I wonder about that. We learn about the movement of the planets in grade school, right? We take it for granted that the sun is we're gonna turn toward the sun and that our season is gonna change and we can grow the food that's dwindling from our winter stores. So enacting the return of the sun was and is an essential way of coping with uncertainty. And to this day, I ask you, have you ever experienced a cold, harsh winter you thought would never end? I did. I lived in Florida and Texas all my life before I went to Michigan. Honestly, the 150 inches of snow, the sun never came fully out for like 4 months. And I thought, oh my gosh, now I understand why people come to Florida in the winter. Now, I recall someone here in the fellowship commenting on the relevance of a solstice celebration in Florida where sunshine abounds. Well, the nights are still long, and my husband Don and I running errands in the evening, we're amazed and delighted. Maybe you take this for granted, but we're seeing this for the first time, how these neighborhoods and gated communities, you know, they kind of have these long boulevards into the neighborhood, and the palm trees are just bedecked from root to the tips of the fronds with lights. And it's joyful. It's a man-made thing, right? It's not nature. But even that picture that picture alone for me can warm my Grinchy heart. My call to you for the remainder of the season is to try to do something proactive this winter season, something that you embody, that you actually get out and do, that creates meaning for you. It can be anything from sitting around a fire pit with your family and friends to taking a drive and touring the holiday lights in the area. Is that a thing here? Yeah, I figured so. It almost looked like a competition, which once again, we're getting back into that consumerist model, but that's okay. The lights have meaning and they mean hope. So slow down. Light up your darkness. Buy local. Be countercultural. And may your embodiment of this season warm your heart and feed your soul. May it be so. Our